Hey everybody, you are watching and listening to the We Are RIZIN podcast. This is your host, a very sickly host, Andrew Benjamin. I'm joined by YAMATO DAMASHI's Jim Ozeki. How you doing, Mr. Ozeki?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It has been a while since I've done one of these podcasts. It has been, I think, almost 3 months since the last one. So,
Oh, so how does it feel to be back on one? Are you like, oh God, not this crap again?
the furthest thing from the truth. No, it's good, man. I really appreciate you reaching out, to be fair. It's not like I haven't been busy. I've been super busy with a lot of other things going on in my life. But yeah, it's good to kind of get some screen time, talk about RIZIN, talk about all the fun stuff that's going on. And yeah, talk about the pandemic and all of that. So,
Is it? I believe you also wanted to say something, or make a statement on. I guess
yeah. So
what.
it's kind of twofold, right? So I've had loads of people reach out to me since Ensign got arrested. And I want to thank everybody because I had loads of really cool support. And I know Sarah, his wife, loads of people around him will be really grateful for all the support that was given. I am still in contact with Ensign. So Ensign is currently in prison right now. He it's a bit difficult because I'm not his legal team has advised me not really to talk about the situation just because of the fact that there's actually the cases coming up the end of this month. So by the end of this month, we should have an idea on what's going to happen next. But for essentially the people who don't know, he initially spent his first kind of 21-day period. He then extended that again based on a second offense. And then since then, he's been waiting for his court date, essentially. But the one thing I'll say is that Ensign is doing well, all things considered. He's reading loads of books. He is getting himself in really good shape, which I'm excited to see. He's an example of someone that will take a negative and put it into a positive. He'll deal with a bad situation. And I don't think I've said this publicly, but right before he was arrested, I was actually on a video call with him. And considering he found out that he was going to get arrested 5 hours into his flight back to Japan, you wouldn't believe how well put together he was in that situation. I think most people would fall apart, but Ensign kind of accepted it, rolled with the punches, and yeah, he was going to make the best situation out of it. And we'll see what happens going forward. But yeah, thank you everybody for the support, and thanks for everyone for reaching out. And yeah, hopefully keep your fingers crossed.
Okay, yeah, Wilson. When you have him back on, though, I expect there to be big numbers, and I expect
It'll
to see
be
him all jacked. He's gonna be all jacked. He's gonna have that Alexander Emelianenko post uh
he,
jail look.
he'll be interested to see how he looks coming out of it. But I mean, the conditions I think are quite interesting where he is. But he, like I say, he's doing his best in the situation. Like,
As you can only do your best as you can in a Japanese prison. Which, if anybody wants to look up, that you can. That's a rabbit hole. That's that's interesting. I'll just say that.
mhm.
Um, but another thing that's interesting, well, at one point was interesting, was RIZIN during the pandemic era. And
Certainly.
so before we start, I'm going to just clarify when I say pandemic, I'm not counting when, the first person got it in China, whatever. I'm specifically talking about when after Japan lockdown, which was February, I believe. No, sorry, March, I believe it was, to April 2024 when sorry, excuse me, 20 this is how sick I am, getting my years mixed up. 2023
Yeah.
when things became that they became more open, or they allowed people to come in.
Yeah.
um Thank you, Luke. I appreciate that. That was an excellent segue, the best I could. Because you know what the funny thing is that during the remember, so Japan had COVID cases, but they didn't shut down. I think they shut down pretty much later than a lot of the other countries, if I remember correctly.
Oh
Because
yeah, definitely. They
remember
were
the
like
February
super
show.
late.
Remember the February show, Rise of 29. there was like still talk of COVID, but Japan that show was open, even though we had Zoom commentary for a number
Yeah.
of reasons for that show. And then, yeah, remember the K1 show happened
Mm,
right when I think they shut down, and they had their show, and they're like, no, don't have your show.
that
And
was
then,
that was a pretty pretentious topic, right?
oh yeah,
Yeah, I
um,
remember that.
I'm going to get up a little timeline that our buddy King CeeLo made. Let me see if I can
Nice.
share this. Let me see. I don't know how to. Oh, okay. I get that up. Maybe it'll see it. But it basically made a nice little timeline. There we are. So as you can see, March 2020, K1 ran that K Festa 3 show. And it was like the only thing running that week, that day, that month probably. And then that's when it became just a desert of nothing going on
Yeah.
for quite a while. Were you watching RIZIN at the time, Jim? Did you? Did you have the podcast at the time?
No, we started. It would have been about 3 years ago. So it was 2021. It was summer of 2021 when we started.
Okay, gotcha.
And
I thought.
I was into RIZIN, but I was a bit of a casual RIZIN fan. I was very into it in the beginning, in the early days. But it kind of doing the podcast kind of got me back into Japanese MMA scene. Actually, I mean, back in the day, I was a Pride fan, I should say, and then a Dream fan and Sengoku. So it wasn't like I was, Johnny Come Lately when RIZIN first started. But yeah, there was definitely for me a bit of a lull point. I was obviously keeping up with what was going on with like Tension and Mayweather and Horiguchi and the big name fights, but it wasn't probably as must see for me as it is now, and it has been for the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Did you watch RIZIN when they had their return shows?
With during COVID, like
when they had their return shows,
oh,
calling
100%.
over and starting over and then calling over.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, actually, to be honest, COVID time was a really good time to kind of get into RIZIN because there wasn't a lot of sport on, right? So there wasn't much stuff to watch. I mean, you had UFC promising Fight Island, which turned out to be the apex, basically, is how we know it. But yeah, the things I kind of got into was watching sumo because that was going on RIZIN, and just kind of keeping up to date more with getting back into the Japanese MMA scene, to be honest, because of all the changes. And we're going to obviously talk about like the positives and the negatives of this time period, but I do feel like there was a lot of positive that came out of this time.
So yes, so RIZIN. Well, there was positive. Let's start talking about the positives that I guess that came from the RIZIN pandemic era. So what were some highlights from you during this time?
Yeah, so as far as kind of the highlights, my big thing, right, with this was that what really brought me back in to the kind of super fandom was they just tried loads of shit. like when you look at all the other MMA organizations, they pretty much tried to do business as usual. Whereas if you look at RIZIN, they literally, we think we had like the landmark shows with the crazy drones going around. We had Bellator versus RIZIN. That was towards the end of the pandemic, but it was still technically part of it. We had, dare I say it, the cage shows with the superior rule set, which I know a certain member of the Discord enjoys. But they did lots of different things. Like, even we had the tag team grappling match with the Tokoro Kanehara. They just seem to like want to throw a few different things out there and kind of see what would work. And I think, a lot happened in that time period, and we're going to come on to like things like the match and break it down and all that sort of stuff. But they were willing to try different things, which I think if you look at RIP Bellator, and even like PFL, like it felt very stagnant. And they managed to kind of separate themselves by doing different things. That's for me the big positive, that they actually were willing to change.
We had I solicited some comments on social media. Let me just get them up. of people, what they enjoyed, what they didn't enjoy from this era. There we are. Some of the comments I got were our good friend Stamkos96 said his main memory is RIZIN begging for money via GoFundMe and then bringing back Floyd and his bodyguard Jizzy.
Oh, how you can.
Speaking of trying new things.
God love Jizzy.
Wait, so was Ensign there? I think Ensign was there when that whole thing, when that press.
Oh yeah. No, Jizzy went up and talked to Ensign. It's a funny conversation about that, but yeah, he was there, man. He's in the thick of it. So if you think Ensign came back to RIZIN with Sidario, right, and Sidario made his debut slap bang in the middle of the COVID stuff, so yeah, a bit of a return to MMA for him. Because he'd been out of the scene for a very long time. It was only that his wife started training that he kind of got back into it.
Another comment, I guess we kind of touched on it, was Captain says RIZIN 22, 23 being $50 each on RIZIN Live. But RIZIN Live still is maybe their best.
You guys love it.
Because it's impeccable quality. The sound, because listen, if Zoom commentary had been on for that long, so I think they were going to go full Zoom after that February show, regardless. I think if we would have appreciated RIZIN Live a lot more, considering how awful the Zoom commentary got eventually.
Yeah. It got pretty bad, right?
Well, it was also, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, technically that didn't start during the pandemic, but certainly I would definitely think that RIZIN uses an excuse to keep the Zoom commentary. That's definitely probably one of the biggest negatives.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad that that's changed. Like Michael Chiavello, just hands down, one of the best combat sports commentators of all time. Just made a huge difference in the last show. I know we're not really talking about the last show, but I just thought that was like so.
I think it would have been much more impactful had he been screaming Tokoro while his mic was like coming in and out because they can't take the sound bleeding in or whatever happens when you're going into like a little microphone like that.
Well, just imagine it being on Zoom. That's all I'd say. Because it would have been great.
With Cena Carminian going, I like this guy's technique.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to discredit some of the previous, because I think Elliot was a good commentator. I've grown to warm to Damian Brown. I still like Joe Ferraro, but Michael Chiavello is just like, he's the real deal. So.
Oh no, but I don't think it's. And again, it's not the people. It's just like
the quality.
You can't have one guy who's in Canada, one guy who's in Australia, and the commentary be on Zoom and not like working out impeccably. It's just not going to happen. That's just how it is. What's other highlights? I would definitely think in terms of who they found, because this was the most interesting. Like, since they were for some time they only could use fighters in Japan. They found some I think people that would not normally have been given a chance. I think a guy like Kyohei Hagiwara does not get a chance if it's not during the pandemic. Maybe he makes it on an Osaka show eventually, but no way that he becomes a regular guy that is doing like 2 or 3 shows a year for the promotion, especially with his record.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And there was loads of people. When I was going back looking at some of the stuff on RIZIN.tv, it was actually quite cool having the video archive there. I was actually having a look and watching some of the stuff back. But it reminded me of how, like you say, how many people debuted. And the ones that kind of stuck out to me, like Chihiro made his debut. Yuta Kubo made his debut. Ota, Miura, Sidario. So many people made their debut during that time of RIZIN, and not to mention all of the K1 fighters as well. We had so many people leave K1 come to RIZIN.
I know we're gonna do a little sliding doors thing later. I think regardless though, K1, I think all those guys still leave K1 eventually because you can't butterfly effect bad management. And by all accounts, seems like K1 was bound to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I don't think they needed a pandemic by the sound of it.
Oh no, not at all. Yeah. So, but also like we wound up. I think we wound up getting some people that were. I think Ryzen did scrape bottom of the barrel for some of these shows, like that Okinawa show where they got the
Yeah,
kickboxer who was 55 or like 50 years old.
we did get a lot of super regional fighters, right? Some of the events you'd see and you'd be like, oh, this guy, like, really, really local, like maybe big in the scene there, but
Well, eventually, some of these shows look more like deep shows at some points, where it's like
yeah.
if this didn't have maybe like one or two guys, you put deep on as a promotion, and you're like, oh, that's a deep show that you have right there, just with more people and a bigger venue.
I think it did. It did. Yeah, you're right. And we're gonna kind of come on to the tournaments as well, but because in fact, let's go to the tournaments right now because I feel like people kind of either love them or hate them. But
I loved so they had the two tournaments. They had the kickboxing one in Osaka, and then they had the bantamweight
yeah,
and the super atom weight one.
super atom weight, yeah.
And they all were I don't think either all three of them were good.
Well,
I
I
think
think everyone was really into them at the time, but
yeah.
then maybe the way they kind of played out didn't go as people expected. And then for me, the thing that kind of made it feel when we look back like, at the time, and even when it was finished, I was thinking, okay, these are great, these are fun, these are different. But when I look back on it now, it's kind of the follow-up that has wrecked it. You know, if you look like where Kai is now, like Kai's gone. Like
Yeah.
the obviously it was Ogi Kubo, you know, in a different division now. Oh my god, super atom weight now is like a shell of what it was when we had that tournament. So yeah, how many women's fights have we had this year? Like Horizon, that's
I'll at least say that the super anime one was at least more varied.
yeah, yeah.
Compared to the the bantamweight one. I mean, if you look back at who they got, so they got Ogi Kubo, they got Naoki Inoue, they got Kenta Takizawa, they got
Yeah.
Yuki Matoya, they had at the beginning, what's his name? Xian. They got I think Xian was in it, or did he qualify?
I remember we had who's the guy that trains with Satoshi Yamaniya? He
Oh
was
yes,
in?
Yamaniha, and yeah,
Yeah.
he beat Kuromoto, and what was a good fight. Remember that was actually an excellent
Yeah.
fight.
There was some good fights in the tournament. For sure. It's just that I don't think it's gonna be remembered that fun. A lot of the guys just like didn't get fights after. It was a bit like,
Yes, so yeah, they had so these are the people that they had. They had Shihan, Takafumi Otsuka, Takeshi Kasugai, Oikubo, Kintaro, Kuya Ito, Inoue, Ishiwatari, Shuto Watanabe and Kai, Kuromoto Yamaniha, Matoya Okada, Ryo Okada, and Kenta Takizawa versus and Mazukatsu Minari, which may have been an incredible fight in its own way. Okay, thank you, Komei Day. Thank you for sending me that. The problem is, but also like that. See, in the Ryzen has a history of doing this, and so many promotions that do tournaments do this, where they were like, "Oh, we are gonna make it obvious who we want to be in the final," and they clearly wanted Naoki Inoue and Kai to be in the
yeah.
final, and like the inverse, like of that, the Star Trek evil goatee version came out of that. So yeah, and um, it did not work. It did. That's not what happened. That is not. And also, I think that's what killed. I think that's why I don't do the 1 day tournaments anymore, because Kai broke his hand in the
Yeah.
fight against Takizawa. Then had to face Ogi Kubo. Couldn't defend takedowns. Therefore, and you got Ogi Kubo'd.
Yeah. Which I don't know. It was too many injuries in that tournament. Everyone needed like long layoffs, I think, after the tournament as well. But I think one of the other what I felt was a bit of a low point was, do you remember when they announced Kyoji and his weird like Bellator Rising contracts? And it was like, hey, I'm the champion, but I'm going to Bellator. Like,
Oh,
it
yeah, that
was,
was
it
weird. That
was
was
so
weird.
up in the air, and it was just, it didn't, it wasn't so much that it wasn't a good look. I mean, it wasn't, but it just, you want to see Horiguchi fight the best people, right? It's one of the best fighters in the world, but at the same time, it was just weird that it was kind of like RIZIN was like still trying to hang on to him when it was clearly that he wanted to fight in Bellator.
Yeah, because I think also the issue was that being that he was training in Florida, I think don't remember,
Oh yeah,
Japan
good
had
point.
those strict restrictions. If you come to
Mm,
Japan, you're staying in a hotel,
yeah.
and so it's like you can't do anything if you're in a hotel. You can't really train. You can't really cut weight, whatever. So like, that's like, why would a fighter want to do that? So that's why I think that was
Mhm.
also impetus for why he wanted to prefer, because he could just stay in America, he could travel in America freely, not have to do any of that of waiting in a hotel, all that stuff. So I think that was also a big impetus for why he was like, oh yeah, high rising, but going to Bellator. Also
Yeah,
maybe because he wanted to do some more fishing.
true. He's a big fisher, right? I think
Yeah.
one of the positives was though that I never felt like the okay, except for the remote commentary, I never felt like the production of the show, especially on the Japanese side, was ever hurt. Whereas like, if you're a pro wrestling fan and you watch like New Japan Pro Wrestling, like that killed my interest in New Japan Pro Wrestling. I don't think I've been back
Oh,
since
no
because of
audiences?
like the whole like no clap thing and like the clap wrestling.
Oh yes. So
Whereas
there's a big misconception. People were like, "Oh, the government was forcing sport." That's not true. So that was all the New Japan stuff was all New Japan, and I think some of the arenas. And I know for some soccer games, football games, uh, that they required that depending on the team, I think it was the Ura Reds got fines by because their fans were cheering because their fans are insane or something.
Mhm.
But there was no like actual government regulation on that. And if you,
Yeah,
I watched the main event for the calling starting over show, and the fans were cheering for the main event, Yachi and Satoshi.
yeah, and I remember when Mikuru fought, it was like it was like a
Yeah,
party going on, and
yes.
it's just I was so stark difference comparing to watching that and something like New Japan, where you can see people like telling them off for like for cheering just a little bit, and for me the RIZIN still felt like a RIZIN, a Japanese MMA show. It didn't feel as neutered as some of the other stuff that you were watching on TV, whether it was here in the West or wherever it was.
Yeah, and I remember there was an interview where Sakakibara was asked, "Did you consider doing no person shows?" And he said no because it's the I think it was twofold reason. He stated publicly that it's because the reason that fans are a part of the experience for the show.
Mhm.
I think it was also a financial reason. There's a reason why they did a GoFundMe. So like you can't make money if you're having no fans in the arena. Basically, it's
Well, they found a way. I mean, with Landmark, they kind of copied Breaking Down in the kind of the obscure little setting, charge a high price for tickets, and I think that was a pretty smart move to copy where it was working somewhere else. Um,
mm.
so I'm looking at King Silo's timeline, and
And this is
he's
part
got
two of his timeline. He had a part one, which I just had on, and then this is part three. A part
this is
two,
quite
sorry.
this is the second one where he's talking about Mr. Y. This is a good segue to the topic
Oh,
that I said. Um, so I was gonna ask you, and feel free anyone in the comments who wants to add to this, but what do you think? And I'm gonna give you a list of 5 different things. What do you think was the biggest scandal during the pandemic? And I'll list off the topics that I thought off the top of my head. If anyone's got any others, feel free to add. But I had Panchan Reina and her posters. I had Chihiro Sugar Mama stealing the COVID funds. We had Bara and Mr. X and getting kicked off Fuji. We had the Kubo and Shibata, the fixed fight, and of course, infamous Flowergate with Mayweather. Which do you think was like the biggest scandal?
In terms of outcomes, I definitely think Mr. Y. The other ones, RIZIN was not like, they did not affect RIZIN.
Mm-hmm.
They just happened to be in the same area.
Yeah.
The Pound Shine Rainer one is so stupid. It's almost, I'm almost like, it's like I almost like, she shouldn't have gotten in trouble with that because for just how dumb she was, like doing that. Sugar Mama one, like I kind of feel bad at Suzuki, kind of, but by all accounts, there doesn't seem to be. He doesn't seem to know what's going on. I don't believe that he knew. Like, but this is, and he made that apology video. That's actually probably he made that little apology video. I think that was a pretty sincere apology video that he made.
Yeah. I mean, give him credit, he's done a very good job of making people forget with the awesome stuff he's done in his career, right? So,
and listen, it got him on all those Trigger shows. Got him even after he lost to Choji. So good on him. Yeah, the Mr. Y one, because you had this journalist who was like, I have definitive proof that Bara is still hanging out, talking to Yakuza and RIZINs, and all that stuff. Now here's the thing, because of here, I think they lose the Fuji TV deal at the end of the year. I think they were going the same route. The CEO of Fuji hated sports. It's kind of like the same thing with HBO, where the guy who took over HBO hated sports and it was like he couldn't wait to get rid of boxing. I think Fuji TV at the end of the year gets rid of RIZIN and says, because that's how all Japanese contracts are. They're all like 1 year for whatever reason, January 1st to December 31st, and then RIZIN goes bye-bye. No ifs, ands, or buts. But they use that as an excuse to like, okay, now we don't have to wait. We can just get rid of them. Get the fuck out of here.
Streamline it.
And I think also the fact that since when it turned out that guy was full of shit, that journalist was like, just did he actually, was it that he made it up? Was that?
I don't know. That's the thing. They never follow up with these sorts of stories, right? So
nothing was found. Like, I thought that I heard that he had gotten that the journalist was full of shit. It was like some tabloid reporter or something like that. It wasn't like someone legit, like from like Tokyo Sports or Gong.
Yeah, I think he had a shady past as well, by the sound of it.
But if you look at what it did, it took the match off TV. Takaru was talking about so much that he was so happy to have K1 back on terrestrial TV, and that was just ripped right from under him. And man, I kind of would want to see like a live reaction to his face, because I know that he had been working so hard for that, and just like being told, hey, you're showing the biggest fight of your career is not going to be on terrestrial TV anymore, and just the sheer amount of disappointment that like.
But then what I will say though, to play devil's advocate, right, is that okay? So you have it on Fuji, right? It does huge on Fuji. It does really well. Obviously, it was always going to do. But the pay-per-view buys probably because of that are not going to be as big, right? And this is where we see like RIZIN completely change its business model. It's all about the pay-per-view now. It's completely, and they're getting way more money from doing it than they probably would ever from Fuji. So it's like they're kind of in a better place, in my opinion, than where they were before. Like, I know a lot of old school fans think like because of pride and everything that Fuji TV is the biggest deal, but I think the way things are moving, the numbers that people pull on Japanese YouTube channels, the independent pay-per-views that you see for people like Yarman and Mikuru, on a beamer, I think that it turned out to be a bit of a good thing in some senses.
It worked out. Luckily, I think it was right time, right place. But still, be on terrestrial TV in Japan, at least, is still Like if Fuji came back to Rise and said, "Hey, we want to go back. We want you back on." Rise Bar is getting that pen out and signing that as quickly as possible. If any channel, Fuji, Asahi, TBS, NHK, because they were the only one. They were the only one at the time. Well, they are. They were. There's no other MMA that's on national terrestrial TV there, and that's still considered like a high bar to be on Japanese TV. It's like
Yeah,
the opposite here. We're like cable. Like if you're on cable, it doesn't matter anymore. There, that influence that the way that that's perceived is no longer as big. If like Mr. Beast is bigger than some bags. Not the that's like you know the example I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah, no, I do. I just think I think if they go back, so say for instance New Year's Eve 2024, you got is on pay-per-view and it's on Fuji. I think they'll kill a lot of their pay-per-view buys. Whereas I actually think if they were ever to return to Fuji, they'd probably do it as like a special. Now I think it would be kind of like, here's a Fuji TV special. It's just gonna be free for everybody. I think they've got a really good pay-per-view business model now. And the last show just proves it, right? If they can build up some of these stars again, it's going to take quite a while because they're not going to have anyone as big as Ren or Mikuru. But I think the future's bright for them, for sure.
But I also question how. So because the question was, okay, so you kicked off Fuji TV. What do you do about stars now? How do people see these people? Not when they're only behind a paywall potentially.
Oh no, dude, YouTube, come on, we got. Think about this, right? And we're gonna get into breaking down because we got it, because it changed everything. And I think this is kind of where we can get into it now. But when you've got like 15 million Japanese people watching short YouTube videos, and these guys are becoming as famous as anybody that's on TV, right? Like for half of it, because the young people, they're sitting on their phones on the subway, they're watching Breaking Down, they're seeing these crazy auditions, they're seeing these stupid 1 minute fights, and these guys are like more famous than half of the RIZIN roster. So I don't think it's limited. You know, I don't think they need Fuji as much as they did. They definitely back in the day they needed it. You know, 2018, 2019 for sure. But I think they're in a much better place.
Okay, I mean, yeah, Breaking Down definitely. But also the thing about what works about Breaking Down is the uniqueness, because like just because like I don't like would the and I remember we talked about this when we had our thing. Can you do the same thing in America or the UK? And I don't think you can, we don't have the same perception about those type. It works for the Japanese culture. Like street, like the closest comparison I could think of is street beefs. If you ever seen that,
Yeah.
but that's not even like it's just like you're taking like regular people and having them fight. It's not, and we laugh at it. We kind of laugh at it, and we it's like we don't take it seriously.
We're like the same age, right? So you remember bum fights? Like that was like
Yeah.
Yes. But that was big. That was super famous. That was really big back in the day.
But that was also at the time that was also right time as well.
I don't know. I don't know if it will. I always still believe there would, if you did a UK version, there would be, and you had like celebrities attached to it. I think it could work for sure. But I definitely get your point though. In Japan, it's a lot of people want to see some of these underground figures. You know, they want to see like the mystique of that side of the world that's in the shadows and the whispers. So when you get some of these young guys that want to grow up and emulate that sort of stuff, it's appealing. You know, it's a demographic thing.
I mean, yeah, like the redneck boxing or whatever they call that here, like does not have the same does not have the same appeal that Breaking Down does, like in Japan. Yeah. It's like
chalk and
we don't.
cheese.
Yeah,
it's totally different. There's nothing like it. You know, this is a Breaking Down is more like a Love Island here in the UK, right? That's the example I could give, like something where it's really kind of cultural relevant to a lot of people, not to me.
Do you think that also? So let's we'll connect it a little bit to a slide endorsing. Do you think that Breaking Down happens regardless of the pandemic? Do you think Mikuru kind of just?
I think it does, because
okay, and then part two of that, do you think it catches on just as much as it did?
Probably yes. I think so. I think it was very unique. And I don't think it was a product of the time, if you know what I mean. I don't think it was something that kind of grew out of COVID. It probably helped that there wasn't as much going on in terms of competitions and sports. I think that probably helped. But
Yeah.
I do think it was more of a, you know, his YouTube channel was already getting really big. He was doing all the kind of the videos of him taking on random, like 4 or 5 different people at a time and stuff like that. That did really well. And then he just kind of capitalized on it. The guy is a genius, whether people want to admit it or not. I mean, say what you want about his fighting career and how it's kind of played out, but as someone with, he's got a hugely successful YouTube channel, and I do think that's like played a massive part in this pandemic period, because if you look at who now is like the biggest star, Ren. It's built off that same kind of energy. Definitely Bara fucking the
match. I guess just quickly, those other two, those weren't scandals to me. It was a day. It was like talk for a day, and then everybody forgot about it. It didn't. There was no long lasting impact on those other. By those other two.
Is there anything I missed out of interest?
Scandals? Good question. Were there any other scandals? If anybody's in the chat, do you happen to know of any other scandals besides the 5 that Jim mentioned? I guess, not so much a scandal, but I guess kind of an annoyance for us was how much RIZIN changed, like in terms of availability. First starting on Fight, RIZIN Live, then Fight Now, Go Fight Live, excuse me. I think, was it Go Live Now, excuse me. Go Live Now. Then Go Live Now disappears. They become unavailable, I believe, and then they go back on Fight. Now they're back on RIZIN TV.
Yes, thank God. And you remember before RIZIN TV, there was like that RIZIN Stream Pass, or was it RIZIN Fight Pass or something?
That does not exist. I'm pretty sure that was a Mandela.
I don't think they did a show on it, right? It was kind of like, here it is. No, yeah, it's if you want to talk, it's not really a scandal, but the experience of international fans during COVID was rough, let's say the least. And all the different distribution channels they looked at didn't really quite pan out very well until now. So I would say they fixed it for sure.
Falling Star has a question. He wants to know: do you think RIZIN will one day be a public company? I have hard feelings about it because the shareholders will have final say in Nasa Hagiwara. Nope, I do not ever see them becoming public.
Never, ever,
never.
And never, ever. Just like, look what's on the screen, and that's to tell you.
Yes. That's Can this be a public company in Japan? Ask yourself that.
Although, to be honest, that probably doesn't change anything as well.
But. That's probably, yeah. I know we did talk about it with the scandal. I'm curious to know the match, and I was discussing this with King CeeLo. We differ on it. Do you think the pandemic brings about the match, or do you think it happens regardless?
It's really hard to tell, right? Because Saki Kabara is always seen as someone that's willing to open to work with anyone. Got to give him that credit. K1, on the other hand, like, I don't know, it's really hard to say. I would probably say, does it happen without the pandemic? Tenshin was really talking about going to boxing, and there was a point where it really didn't look like it was going to happen. So I'm probably going to say no. I don't think it would. I don't think it would have happened without the pandemic.
Here's what I've learned about Japanese companies: is that when they're desperate and they're not doing good, that's when they team up. That's the history of pro wrestling. That's the history, somewhat history of MMA, kind of. But in pro wrestling, we're seeing it now. New Japan's working with Noah, AEW, I guess kind of AJPW, the Marigold, whatever. So it's, I don't think, I'm kind of in that boat that it does not happen. I think K1 is stuck in their ways because reasons. Takaru may want it. But Tension is like, no, listen, it's not gonna waste his time on it because if it's not, I'm just gonna go to. He's just gonna go to boxing. I think, yeah, he goes to boxing probably maybe even earlier if
Yeah.
the pandemic doesn't happen. He tries to because he tries to go he's gonna wants to become like in a way, go that route. Um, Luke says TDT being a massive scam who just reappeared recently as well.
Yes. Someone posted about that. Who was it who posted? I can't remember. Need to give him credit.
So that was the same company that the COVID lady.
I think it was Stu. Yeah, Stu. I think Stu posted about it.
That she was the one. She ran that company, I believe, right?
She was involved, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What the sugar mama?
Yes. I think that was her company.
Was it?
I think that's TDT. Well, we can.
It's hard to verify. Does anyone know the sugar mama's name? We must track her down.
But yeah. Yeah. It just reappeared out of nowhere on Instagram. So who knows? Who knows? Japanese companies tended to die and then come back from the dead out of nowhere. Um. Uh. I was also gonna say I will. We have to talk about it because if I don't, Jay Wolf's gonna bite my head off. Trigger One. It was the first Cage show. Do you foresee? Do you think? Do you? I know that Bara had talked about the 3 hours plan, but do you think that they do you think they still do all these these types of shows, regardless of the pandemic?
I hope they do.
Like a Landmark type show, Trigger type show for Trigger.
Yeah, I like it, to be honest. Whoa, we still good? Connection's going a bit crazy. Yeah.
Oops, sorry. I'm back.
Cool. Yeah, I hope they do kind of do different types of shows because I think you end up appealing to quite a wide side of the audience. I'm not saying, hey, go full on Fight Circus and do like all this crazy shit, but it's fun when they experiment. This is why I've always rated Saki Kabara because he has that Bara magic, right? He'll pull something out the rabbit hat, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But
it's also, Jim. Can you just hold on 1 second? I have to be right back.
Yeah.
Take over.
I'll praise Saki Kabara, and we'll talk about the cage just for J Wolf. But yeah, Trigger the series was good. I do think it was fun to see those events in the cage. It was interesting, right? To see the superior rule set, seeing those soccer kicks, seeing some of those stomps, in kind of the cage side of things. But it's not something you want to see all the time. So to Andrew's question, do I think they should do those types of events? The Landmark series as well we had. Yeah, I think they should carry on all that sort of stuff because I think, and most fans will agree with this, right, is that we kind of need more RIZIN content because sometimes there's just massive gaps between shows. And actually, maybe just having a small show just to fill it out would be quite good, not only just for content and to keep that kind of regularity of product to watch, but also just for the divisions, help build some of those stars. We talked earlier kind of about we had a lot of regional stars during COVID, but sometimes that does help. Sometimes guys become bigger stars because they're just fighting so regularly. We saw good things with Suguru Ni. He's a name that was kind of continuously on the cards and kind of built that following and built that reputation. Okay, some of his last performance didn't go quite the way. Should RIZIN do its own contender series? Asked the Falling Star. That would be interesting. I think it depends on how it looks, because I think if you did kind of a just here's a bunch of regional guys, I think it just looks like another Deep. It looks like another Shuto. It looks like stuff that's already out there that you can go and watch right now. I think that if you did it maybe where you've got some celebrities involved, you've got other people, some sort of different link to it, some sort of where they are, lesser known guys, but they're trying to make a star out of themselves. It does sound a bit like breaking down now that I'm talking about it, but I do think that would be a good shout, like some kind of show where people can kind of make a name for themselves, but additional content. Yeah, definitely. I don't, maybe a different format to the Contender Series, but something along the lines where actually these are lesser known people and we're going to try and make them stars. And then Hamza says they need some like RIZIN Fight Night or RIZIN Challenges. Yeah, just different types of shows. Just mix it up, because the numbered shows are always really good. And now we're seeing this kind of transition to Super RIZIN. So we've had 3 of them now. So you've obviously got the kind of like the big New Year's Eve, then you're going to have your big event in the summer, guaranteed for Super RIZIN. We're now starting to see some of these international shows. We obviously saw Azerbaijan last year. Do we get Uzbekistan this year? I think we probably will, is my gut says that. But I could see them looking to do something else as well, something just to fill in those gaps. Because if you think about it, you're going to eventually at some point have to do more, because the demand is there now. RIZIN's pretty hot in Japan. So... but yeah, no, I think I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I personally feel that they're in a better place than they were even pre-pandemic. Sign bigger unknown guys and put them in smaller events. Yeah, interesting. It's going to be interesting to see who they sign moving forward. We obviously saw there was a flyweight contender they signed recently. I know a lot of people were talking about Mokaev and whether he would come into RIZIN, but I don't know if that would have been a good fit, just fighting style. You want top contenders, but you want exciting contenders. Kobe Day says there has to be at least 2 landmark left this year. Yeah, surely, right? I think one of them is the Uzbekistan show. I reckon we're getting that. Barra doesn't just fly out to these countries just for a cup of tea. He goes out there and he seems to make deals happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a big pot of government money waiting for him, and we're seeing an Uzbek show, probably, end of the year, and then they'll probably pick somewhere in Japan, right, as well, just somewhere notable, somewhere different. Falling Star, should RIZIN now reach out for foreign investment? I know Goldman Sachs have its own sports investment division now. Falling Star, I don't know what to tell you, but in Japan, man, lots of people investing, lots of sponsors, and I wouldn't be surprised if RIZIN has lots of different backers already, but it maybe not just quite as public spotlight. And I don't think a company like RIZIN really wants to go under that microscope, to be honest. I don't know if you guys remember. I think it was Shu talking about it. Shu Hirata, great manager, great podcast, was talking about kind of the difference between like one strategy and RIZIN, where you had one would go after all these big investments, whereas RIZIN was kind of just doing their own thing and almost a bit on a lifeline sometimes, right? It was like we've got someone else is going to come in and fund Mayweather, and that's going to make a big show. It's very different, right? I think RIZIN is in a niche of its own when it comes to operations. And us Gaijin, I don't think we'll ever comprehend it, is all I'll say. What else have we got? Hamza's talking about more 170s, 185. That's an interesting one, right? Because there's not many. I mean, you can bring people in for 170s and 185, and that could be good. If you look at the history of Pride, right, the bringing in the international fighters, the top talent was really what kind of excelled it in the later years of Pride. So could they do that sort of thing again? I think it's harder now, though. UFC swallowing up quite a bit of competition. It would be nice as well, I think, for a lot of the MMA guys to want to go to Japan. Back in the day of Pride, a lot of the fighters just really wanted to feel what it was like in the Saitama Super Arena. They wanted that experience. They wanted that big stage. Whereas maybe because RIZIN has had kind of a smaller profile, we're getting it a lot less, I guess. We're getting not many people clamoring to come over, which really surprises me, right? It probably surprises you guys because, you know, you're all watching it. You will see how great it is. So I think that's going to change. You know, I think RIZIN is making big moves internationally. I think the yen being so weak is probably a reason why we got no more remote commentary. I think it's a big reason why you know we got a big name like Michael Chiavello. I think the Pacquiao thing would have happened regardless, but I think they've kind of said, you know what, we're going to invest in English subtitles on the YouTube channel because they actually see that, you know what, if we get a certain percentage of the market, and you can tell they're not looking to like just take over, and I don't think they can. But I think what they can do is put a much more compelling product out there than a PFL, you know, or a Karate Combat. You know, what they're putting out there is something that is different and is gonna eventually, you know, the US fans are gonna pick up on it. You know, the other Western fans are gonna see it. And I think when you have something like a Michael Chiavello screaming, you know, after a big knockout that goes viral on X, on Twitter, you know, people want to see that. They go, shit, you know, what is this all about? And I think that's what's going to start changing things. We're going to get more people into RIZIN. Even the last show, I don't know if you guys have seen online, but the last show feels like it had way more buzz coming off it and during it than any RIZIN show in the past. And Mikuru versus Ren was big for JMMA fans like us, but loads of the other sort of more casual MMA fans, they don't know who they are, right? So it definitely felt like there was way more buzz from international fans. Let me go through some of these comments. Where did we get to? Don't be like PFL, let other invest, but don't spend your own money. Hey, I don't want to get into PFL because I may start a rant. You know, there's some great people behind it. Obviously, like people like Ray Sefo, Randy Couture's involved. But for me personally, PFL is just one of the hardest watches, and it's not even the rule set. It's just dull. It's UFC light. It's, you know, needs to do something a bit more different in the production. It's too same. Where are we going? By unknown, 170, 185, 205 heavyweights and put them in smaller shows and then in big shows. Yeah, maybe. I mean, take Sidario, for example. He's fought loads of like unknown big heavyweight fighters like Janko, you know, other names I can't even recall who's fought. And they just don't really do much. Like, you know, if you take the big Hungarian guy, Jakas, and put him against Saint, do people care that much? I don't know. Like, I think it would take a lot to build him up. It's hard with those weight classes. Should RIZIN team up with RWS Muay Thai as the next major promotion collab? That would be cool. I think, yeah. I mean, the best thing about Barra is that he's done so many different collabs, right? The Bellator one, I think, was really good to watch for fans, especially the way it culminated, even if the outcome wasn't the best.
So sorry about that. I had to take care of work things.
No worries, man. I was just answering some of the questions, but Falling Star asked whether RIZIN should team up with RWS Muay Thai as the next major promotion collaboration.
Hey, speaking of the guy who they signed during the pandemic, Nadaka came in during the pandemic. I think Code Mayday says it best. Muay Thai does not draw in Japan. They bring the Muay Thai guys over to be defeated by Japanese guys. Yeah.
I mean, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
It's a fair point. But hey, why not experiment in it? Although I think we're getting Fight Circus right first. You know,
yeah.
we already had that actually technically, didn't we?
I was also gonna say so how about what were there any favorite matches or shows that you had during the pandemic era?
So my favorite pandemic show, I mean, I'm a bit biased. It's the one I was at live, which was RIZIN 40, RIZIN versus Bellator. To me, that's such a memorable show, and it is like at the tail end of the pandemic. But when I remember when I went
So
out to
was that the
Japan,
one that
there,
had the Bellator show first and then the Ryzen show?
no, it's was
Oh
the
no, I'm sorry. This is the one the year before that. Sorry.
this yeah, that's before that. That was right. Was that 2020? I think it was
Yes, that
right
was
before the
22. That
pandemic.
was
Yeah.
AJ McKee Satoshi, right?
Yeah. So yeah, this was AJ McKee, Satoshi. This was the 5-on-5, if you remember it, and Ryzen ended up going 0-5.
Yes.
But that show, oh my god, to explain to you how good it was live was unreal. Because if you remember, the undercard had so many good like knockouts, great finishes. One of the scariest knockouts I ever seen was with Bay Noah. Do you remember
Yep.
Patrick Usami just like
Yep.
floored him? And it kept building on the card. And then when we had the big intermission, and I don't know, was this? I've always wondered, was this because when I watched it back, and you had that awful Showtime street
Well,
version of it, right?
we were talking about just the uncertainty of watching Ryzen. Yeah, that show was tape delayed.
Yeah, and you had like Big John in the studio and stuff like that. It was like, oh, like when I watched it back, I was like, this does not do it justice.
The what was his name? Who's the guy?
More?
Thompson. Who's the guy? Thompson. What's his name? The
Oh,
fighter.
Josh Thompson.
Josh. Yeah. It was his attitude that really turned off. Telling people, "Oh, enjoy the tape delay." Like that's not how you like. In the year 2021 or whatever, 2020, excuse me. Like we're talking about tape delay. Like it made no sense. There was no what I would like to hear the compelling reason why it had to be tape delayed. Like, was it like there's no like if somebody can make a reason, I want to hear it. And then the attitude of like, oh, take it and be happy. No, people shouldn't have had to be happy with that.
It's really crazy the experience that kind of Western fans had for that show, because in the building, like I say, it built so well, and then right before they did the Bellator part 5x5, they played the Pride music, and like the old Pride theme, right? And I don't think like that's been played since. So I think Rampage. Did Rampage walk out to it when he fought Fedor? But I think that was kind of like the last time it'd been heard in like the Saitama Super Arena. And so when they played that, like the vibe was just different. Actually, CJ was there, Charlie was there, and me and him were talking about that, about how like it switched up another level. And then that fight was you had Takeda versus the Khabib guy. Is it Ramonov?
Yes,
Ramonov?
Rabadanov.
Forgive me. Yeah. So like, and the effort and the fighting spirit he showed in that fight, despite losing, the crowd went nuts for it. And all of the fights were pretty much like that, other than the god awful Pitbull Kleber fight, where that kind of like killed the air in the room a little bit. But it was just such a cool atmosphere, and even like because Suchul Kim, I still think won that fight against Arch, and Satoshi, I was really close to AJ as well. It was a close fight. So, and I think that kind of built the story for next year, because this is one of the things I was going to ask you about actually with RIZIN versus Bellator. Do you think them losing 0-5 helped them or hurt them?
Not helped Bellator or helped RIZIN? Sorry,
RIZIN.
If anything, it should have helped Bellator. I don't think it was ever going to hurt RIZIN, but the fact is that even after the fact, Bellator still got no respect. I think that's more important. That no matter what Bellator does or did, they could not get the respect of it was still a laughing stock. Like, also, the other thing I also, just a kind of separate question. I want to ask you this: Do you think if there's no pandemic, do you think Bellator goes on Showtime, or is it still on the CBS Sports or whatever? I don't think it is. I think it does not touch Showtime, and then they get rid of it much earlier.
I think you're probably right. I think
Showtime was
Bellator.
desperate for shit. They couldn't, so they're like, "What do we have? Bellator. It's cheap. Whatever. Put it on."
I still feel sorry for Coca though, because I feel like he wasn't really running the ship, if you know what I mean. It was Viacom decisions, and let's try and make the best of it. And
Oh yeah, you're right, but also you kind of, it's like you have to kind of, if you're the face of the company, you kind of have to learn to work with that and like accept responsibility, not try to justify why Ryota Machida versus Ryan Bader or Phil Davis was a great fight. Like you need to
yeah,
you kind of have to, yeah, like Todd Atkins said it best. He was just collecting a paycheck. That's, and look now, and now he's promoting regional shows in San Diego that aren't even available, like on television on any sort of streaming service.
I think he'll be back. I generally do think he's a decent promoter. I think
I'm
he'll be
still
back.
waiting. Listen, J. Wolf said that he was supposed to be offered a job at RIZIN. Still off. I'm still waiting for that. Still waiting for that, J. Wolf.
Him and Jay Wolf can go work in that LA office together.
Yes, Scott Coker's going to unmask and he's going to turn into a 7-foot tall guy, and it turns out it's J. Wolf all along.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's not so much that it hurt or because don't forget the interpretation of a loss is different to the Japanese audience than a loss for us.
100%.
We said you lose in the West, you are a fucking bum. You're a piece of shit. Unalive yourself. Get the fuck out of here. Japan, the loss is not like that. And the funny thing is that even with Bellator winning, like, and the, even with the, I guess you could say 3 of the fights were more dominant than the others. I think the fact that it made the RIZIN fighters look legit and that they weren't like, except for I would say Horiguchi Ogikuba was the only one, but the other ones weren't like, clever, and also Pitbull, but the other 3 weren't like just like, oh, the RIZIN guys got smashed.
They looked decent, right? It was competitive fights, and I think the Japanese fans definitely saw that for sure. So
yeah,
I don't think it hurt them one bit. It kind of just played into the story, right?
I think if they win, there's no, listen. If they win, they're like, oh, all the Bellator guys are dog shit. These guys are like whatever. Like, look what happens after they won. Like nothing. I think no respect.
I think I'm not gonna say it's a shame Bellator closed, although technically anyway. But you could see that they were obviously leading. If it probably would have been this year to do the whole rematch series again, I reckon it's probably what would have happened. You'd have it 2022, have a year to regroup, and they probably would have done it again, I think. But it is what it is. PFL is not Bellator in my eyes. So
no, it's not. No, it's
and
not.
What does Jay Wolf call it? The super collab event?
The super collab event, yes.
We don't need PFL there. But BKFC I enjoy. I think that's been a fun mix, but yeah, you missed what you were going
do you think we see BKFC and RIZIN working even earlier if there's no pandemic? Because don't forget, remember that time that RIZIN was trying to, like, you had like everybody at least fought once. You had like someone from one fighting in RIZIN. You had some. Do you think we see that happen earlier?
Where were we? I'm trying to think where we were pre-pandemic. Yes, maybe. I don't know, because you had the Mayweather tension. What? That was end of 2018.
Yeah.
That's a big name to get outside. But then who did, I suppose, where were the other promotions before that?
BKFC was still kind of like this underground kind of
Yeah,
thing.
we'll have to confirm,
I don't know.
But I can't remember where they were in 2019. Like, I don't think it would have got the traction that it does now, because BKFC is kind of a bit all the rage, right? I think they picked a good time.
Here's the other thing as well. Let's say if BKFC or RIZIN still on Fuji TV, you know how Japanese fights are with blood.
Yeah.
Does Bar look at that, or if people at Fuji TV look at that and be like, hell no, hell no, that's not going on.
It would be untelevised prelims for sure. Like, that's the other thing as well. No Fuji TV. We've got tattoos. We've got blood. It's a very different product.
Yeah. One of the things I want to ask as well. So we talked about before, like people who were signed, who made into RIZIN and then became kind of RIZIN regulars and who are still fighting. I'm curious to know, do you have any fighters who, looking at them being signed during the pandemic and now, who would you not have? Who would you not? Who would you be like, nope, okay, pandemic's over, goodbye. We don't need you. Goodbye.
Say that again. So we're talking so
Yeah, so
people
like
that were
they fought
signed
during
during
the
the
like they were signed during the pandemic and they still fight now. But
Okay.
they were clearly like a pandemic hire because they were
Hmm.
desperate and they needed fighters.
Did we have Ushiku before pandemic?
No, he came during the pandemic. Remember,
Yeah.
he had the non-title fight with Saito. Saito said,
Oh,
"No to non-title. I want to defend my title." Yeah,
he won,
yeah.
and then God help
Yeah,
us, and then we had that.
That set another direction, another butterfly effect.
Yeah, he'd probably be the first on my list, unfortunately. Just
Mine too. The meme was funny at first because he has all these weird wins, but looking at how he fights now and like how he fought since then, it's like, no, this like, sorry, buddy, deep is where you belong.
yeah, you have that Asakura fight was just, what are you doing? Like, why are you pulling guard? It was just rough to watch.
I was also gonna say Genji Umeno, who made his debut during that awful kickboxing tournament. I don't get it. I just every fight in RIZIN that he has had has been terrible. That he's won has been terrible.
He's had some fun entrances.
If I had to see that Yavai face another time, I think I just might go on a killing spree. Like, I probably shouldn't joke about that on YouTube. I'm gonna take that back. I'll eat my own face. Like, I can't remember the one fight that I remember. Okay, he had his first fight ended in no contest with the headbutt with Cozy.
Yeah,
and I think that's why he still has a job because like they felt bad that like that was his first fight, so he kind of has a job forever. Then remember he fought Trent Girdham in a kickboxing match, and then Girdham like pulled his kneecap.
And didn't he have to fight with Ren as well in the boxing match?
Yeah, it was an exhibition. He got knocked out at like 2:59 of round 3.
Yeah, right at the end. Yeah. Let's flip it though. Who do you think were some of the best signings or some of your favorite signings from the COVID era? Because
oh man. I think I also have to say that Kyohei Hagiwara worked out. But the problem is that now that they've opened up and now the talent's becoming more diverse, I think we're kind of seeing his ceiling, unfortunately. But
maybe so. We'll see.
His personality is what makes him watchable.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I love Hagiwara. It's always good to watch him fight.
Especially because, like, remember when he came in? He was like 1-2 or 1-3. And was he a late replacement? He may have been, or his opponent was a late replacement. And he came in with so much confidence. And like it was so unheard of to hear from a Japanese guy. Now you kind of have like all the Japanese guys try to sound tough, but like
didn't they debuted Landmark 1, right, with Asakura and Hagiwara?
Yes,
I remember it was the whole Plus Weed sponsorship.
Yes, Plus Weed. Yes,
yeah.
And remember he had the fight of Ren's MMA debut as well.
Yeah.
So I think business wise, I think he's like. Not fight quality wise, but business wise, he was a perfect pandemic signing.
Okay, where'd you put this person in which of those categories? Yuta Kubo. Are you in the get rid or are you in the keep him?
I keep him because at least from
his
I
wife.
would say if he
ex-wife, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I keep him because he's clearly showing that he's a great fighter. At first, I was like, "Oh, this ain't gonna work out." Then the whole Shibatar thing and like it was just bad. But like, I think he's finally getting MMA at this point. I think he's finally becoming a better MMA fighter.
Yeah, I agree too. I like him, to be honest. Like some of his fights haven't been great, but
no,
I think it's partly who they match him up against. But the whole thing with Sarah, his ex-wife, is just it's what you need.
It's so weird. It's so bizarre.
good. It's built for the confession.
Now you even say ex-wife, and that makes it even more weirder. No, that's the thing. It's even more weirder because I don't know how divorces are in Japan, but like it's so uncommon to still be connected to your ex like here. Same thing in the UK probably, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Maybe not, but of course it's the number one religion in the UK was founded because the guy wanted to divorce his wife and he couldn't divorce, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Luke put Dominator, which is a great show.
Absolutely.
Please, we've seen enough of that. Sorry, man.
I've never seen a more ironic name for a fighter who like doesn't dominate. Really, like. Also, by the way, one of the worst shows when he beat that where he beat Hagiwara at that Osaka show and like killed any sort of energy when he just tapped him out in the first round.
Luke is just spilling them out.
Just going
Kyle Ogden.
Agawon. Listen, I think
he's
he's retired now, so we don't have to worry about him anymore. And listen, he was always going to get the Miyu rub, the Guam/Miyu, Moto rub. Here's one. And he debuted during the Bantamweight Grand Prix. Kenta Takizawa.
Here's a funny story. I've saw this, I think, on the YAMATO DAMASHII podcast, but Takizawa, right? When I went to the weigh-ins before RIZIN 40, and you saw all the fighters get off the bus. And it was obvious which way they needed to walk, and all of them walked the right way. And then Takizawa just completely turned the wrong way, and he just comes across sometimes as just super nerdy. I know he did like the TikTok dances and stuff like that, and he's had some good knockouts. But I'll never forget that, just because he just looked like such an idiot. But would I keep him? Yeah, I would keep him, because generally his fights are most time pretty decent. What about you?
He's a good bantamweight gatekeeper, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think he's an exciting fighter. I think he's good enough to where you keep him as a bantamweight gatekeeper for some fights.
I'm sure he had a pretty decent knockout in the tournament, right? I'm pretty sure he did.
Was it against? I think it was against Yuki Matoya. I believe it was Matoya. I believe.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kleber, Ren, and Chiro.
I thought he was talking about he would not sign those guys. I was like, what? I misread you, Luke. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good shout. They all became huge.
I have a question. So here's a little bit of a sliding doors segment as well. Where do you think during the pandemic, what could have, do you think, what could have killed RIZIN during the pandemic? Why are we still talking about? What do you think? What things that they could have done and that like, oh, they're fucked forever, or they can't, or like they go bye-bye?
It's hard to say. I think the thing that keeps them together is I feel like they have a very strong team. I don't know many of them personally, and you probably know a lot more of them than I do. But the impression I get is that it's a really small team of people that work incredibly hard. A lot of people see how hard Shingo works, but even I'm sure Hafid, he works super hard as well, right? On all the international stuff. The whole team there is just like, you could feel, right, that like Barra's got this. Like, I've met Sakakibara and he has this like aura about him, and there's an energy for sure. And I feel like he probably can inspire people to do the craziest of shit. And I feel like that they've got such a strong team that's kind of what probably kept things going, where Sakakibara kind of said, you know what, we're going to do this. And then that team just goes out and they just deliver it. So what could kill them? The only thing I think that would probably kill them is if they had key people leave. Barra's talked about retiring. I think that would have done it.
What about what Hamza says. UFC buying their 125 fighters, which I think they're doing. Well, it looks like they're almost doing now.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they find a good way of making stars. Like Barrow will just bring in he'll find to make an interesting fight, right? And he's brought in a whole. You think about some of the people he's brought in to try and get ratings and views. Thinking people like
Oh yeah, Bobby.
Bobby,
Yeah.
right?
Bobby.
Like all sorts of crazy people, and some of them hit, some of them miss. So I just think Dana could sign half the roster, and he's still between him and Shingo probably find a pretty good roster. What do you think could have killed him?
What could have killed them? I think if they had run no audience shows, I think that would have done them in.
Mm-hmm.
I think they would have lost a lot of their fan base because, like, I think no audience shows really killed a lot of things. I didn't kill some things, but I think with sports, pro wrestling, like we saw what did in New Japan, kind of, and then New Japan tried to say, "Oh, fans can go back in, but we can, whatever." I think also. Sorry, sorry.
I was gonna say just on that point, they did kind of dabble in that though, because you think the early landmark shows there was like barely anyone attending them, but
those were like
well produced, I guess, for the drones and stuff like that. Yeah. It was an interesting watch, but I guess it was only like 4 fights for the first one. So
I think also so let's just say if they had like the power that like one did, where they could still bring in foreign fighters, I think that might have also. I think there was good and bad, kind of just only having fighters that were based in Japan was that it allowed them to save money and, allowed them to develop people who probably wouldn't, again, I don't think Hagiwara gets a chance like pre-pandemic RIZIN if you just look at, or like he gets one fight, then we probably never see him again. I think that's another thing. I think I definitely think that those are the main things that they didn't become obsessed with trying to get foreign fighters over, like one did and a few others. I think that's, and also I think you brought up a good point that nobody kind of jumped ship when they could have probably done that. Mm-hmm. Could have just said like, let's read the tea leaves, and no, they stuck, and it's worked out so far.
You gotta comment on RIZIN Will Die.
Yes.
Is Kuramoto the best gatekeeper signing during the COVID era, purely for fight quality?
I think he's better than a gatekeeper.
I think he's better than a gatekeeper as well. Yeah. I mean,
he did better. He did good against Ji Yong Yang.
Yeah. The fight with obviously he lost it, but the fight with Ota, that was super exciting as well. So
oh yeah, for the few seconds that it lasted, for the first
minutes, yeah. But the build up to that was really good.
Oh yeah,
he's a decent signing.
Chris wants to know if these lists came from King CeeLo. Yes, he did. Good old King CeeLo. So he ask him to send them to you, and he will definitely send them to you. Hard to believe that RIZIN was one of the very few fight promotions that had fans in attendance during the pandemic, and despite their issues, didn't disappoint. Yeah, I would overall agree with that. Agreed. And I checked the first comment. So, let's wrap this up, Jim. Overall, from the time that the pandemic started or till when it ended, do you think that RIZIN, I mean, obviously they were successful, they're still around, but do you think it's an era that was good that was good quality-wise?
I think considering where we were in the world and what was going on and how, I mean, some countries had less lockdowns, right? But in the UK, it was pretty god awful.
Yes.
They provided a really good outlet and good entertainment. So yeah, I think they did a good job. And when I look back on it, like, okay, yeah, we kind of talked about the tournaments and maybe after it didn't kind of pan out as probably we'd hoped to get like those really solid divisions. But generally speaking, I think they did a good job in a bad situation. What about you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, especially when they came back in August, there was still kind of nothing. August 2020, there was still not a lot, but there was, New Japan was running, but their shows were like funerals. and but RIZIN came back with two back-to-back shows with full crowds, so that was great. Excuse me, and yeah, I mean, I think the New Year's Eve show, that Bellator versus RIZIN show, were fucking great.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Both of them, and then you had the Kai versus Kyoji rematch as well, which really, that really. Well, they were lucky. I shouldn't say lucky, but it was, in hindsight, Kai beating Kyoji kind of worked out, I think. Because do we get that rematch at that time? I don't know, but luckily it happened the way it did. So we got a big match. They got a big crowd for New Year's Eve, and RIZIN was able to really, really weather a storm that a lot of companies did not survive or had to scale back on. We're still doing UFC Island shows, the Apex shows.
Yeah.
Come on.
Two quick things. One, Hamza asked, do Brits like RIZIN, or are they just UFC fans, new people? UFC is way more popular here now. Is RIZIN popular? No, not really. Maybe that'll change one day. But yeah, boxing and UFC are the big things here. Boxing predominantly is the biggest one. What I was going to ask you was, and it's kind of after the pandemic, and it's kind of off topic, but New Year's Eve 2024, what big matches do you think we're going to get?
I think we might unfortunately get Chihiro versus Pitbull. And I say unfortunately because Aaron Pico should be getting the next shot before Bellator goes out of business.
It's more Kleber. Like Kleber and Chihiro.
I'd rather have that. I would rather have that, but
100%.
I would rather have that, but
there are two people in this world that want to see Chihiro versus Pitbull again, and it's Chihiro and Jay Wolf.
Yes. I think it's that. I think I want to say Kyoji gets a fight, but I just don't know who. I honestly don't know. Like, if you we'll probably get a boxing exhibition fight as well. Unfortunately,
I don't think we're getting Ryan Garcia. I
hope we don't get Ryan Garcia.
Yeah, Shu kind of said on the podcast, didn't he, that like he sounded pretty difficult to work with, so I don't think he's coming back.
Yeah, and also I think it just like they got no coverage here, so like I hope that RIZIN's kind of like it's not worth it. It's really not. It probably got no coverage in UK as well, probably, right? Maybe the Sun covered it, had a picture.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
What's the big
Izawa versus Reina?
Yeah,
that's gotta happen. If that doesn't happen, then it's a travesty. It's like I don't know what like. There's no one else for Izawa to fight. It's really like
that's the fight that just needs to happen now.
Yeah. Matoya needs to get a fight. He's fought in RIZIN every year since the promotion has been around, and he has not gotten a fight in 2024 in RIZIN. He needs a fight in RIZIN.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe against Dodson, Matoya versus Dodson, and then whoever.
What do you think Ampo does?
Let's just do the Kimura fight. Just take Kimura's word that he's not on drugs or steroids at this point. Just do the fucking fight. Do the fight before anything else. Before like this is getting to like Naoki Inoue, Kai level where like I'm starting to think that this fight will never happen because the thread, if you watch The Acolyte, is not allowing it to happen.
I haven't seen it, but just I hear what you're saying. Let Kimura take whatever he wants and just book that damn fight.
Yeah.
And Ren, what do you think they do for Ren?
I would say I think last man standing belt. If you could do a rematch with Hagiwara if he beats Ryo Takagi.
I don't know. I don't think it's not.
But
really
they're both strikers. They're both strikers, so that kind of works.
If Hagiwara wins, though, I think he's more facing a Kubo. Do you know what I mean? Like two strikers could be a fun fight. That's
it could be, but also the Ren fight. That was Ren's first MMA match, and like he was clearly not ready. And I think now would be a much more competitive fight, and the buildup would be great for it.
Maybe I feel like Hagiwara will not be able to beat Ren though. It doesn't feel as competitive. I would be interested to see where they go with him and what they do next.
Code Mayday said Kai beating Horiguchi kind of worked out. It was one of the best outcomes in Rise history. Don't forget, Kyoji also could have been permanently injured. He could have possibly retired because his knee got so far. You could have that match with like a torn ACL or something. And it's lucky that it worked out the way it did. I don't know if you agree with me with that on Jim, but like that fight could have caused a lot more problems than it's luckily didn't turn out.
Yeah, I agree.
Falling Star says, I think what saved RIZIN during the pandemic was the rise of Inoue's boxing career was rising too. Inoue brought in more casual people into combat sports. That's a good point. I can definitely concede that, Falling Star. Mm-hmm. That I don't know how much crossover there is. There's anything I learned from the match is that MMA fans will watch kickboxing, but kickboxing fans won't watch MMA. So I feel like there's I don't know if there's crossover with boxing so much.
You don't think kickboxing fans watch MMA? Even when
I think that a lot of them I think a lot of them look down on MMA. At least in my.
Do you think is that international fans or is that Japanese fans?
I don't know about international fans, but at least like Western fans, Western kickboxing fans love kickboxing. They'll watch the most obscure like Raja Demand show from Bangkok at like 4 a.m. So I admire their fandom, but like a lot of them, at least my perceived interactions are that they do not like MMA. It's like a lesser sport for whatever reason.
But I don't think that's the case in Japan, though. I get the impression.
I don't know. Well, Rise and K1 aren't doing so well, but RIZIN is. So I wonder, like, I don't know. It's hard. I don't know. I really can't tell. Maybe they do better in Osaka. Maybe it's like a thing where, like, oh, Osaka will get more kickboxing fans than in Tokyo. I don't know.
Maybe that's King Celo's got a good comment. That's funny.
Oh, sorry, I haven't scrolled all the way down. What did he say? Where are the Japanese kickboxing? The silent combat sports fans. I think though overall, hopefully RIZIN doesn't have to go through something like this again. Hopefully they can just they seem to be back on course. So yeah. Presumably that monkeypox doesn't take over the world at this point. So
please no.
Please. Yeah, please no. We don't need to be talking about monkeypox era of RIZIN 10 years from now. That sounds so bad, monkeypox era. Jim, where can people reach you and check out Yamato DAMASHII, which is currently frozen in time?
I mean, we're currently on hiatus, but we do have a whole backlog of podcasts. We did over 100 episodes. We did some really cool YouTube videos as well. We went out to Thailand this year. We met the Prince of Thailand, actually. We actually took him to Santi Hanoi Gym. So that's a cool video. Check that out. Keep supporting Ensign by YAMATO-fightgear.com. Buy his book. Support him despite everything going on. It's a challenging time for me personally. I'm on Twitter, Ozeki_Jim. I am on Instagram. If you can find me, follow by all means. But yeah, I really appreciate you reaching out, man. It was super fun. It's every time we meet, and we've met a few times in person, right? It's always like we just talk for hours about combat sports. So we're lucky we did an hour and a half actually, because we could have way longer.
You can check out We Are RIZIN Podcast on YouTube, which are on now, presumably. We Are RIZIN Pod is the Twitter. Thank you for tuning in to this. This was great. Support Ensign as best you can. Please do not try to do anything that will hurt his cause. That's all I'll say. And Jim, can't wait for the return show for you guys.
We'll be back in some form.
Great, and thank you all for tuning in. Take care. Have a good day.
Cheers, everybody.